Alright, so let's start out with the storage workflow. Now, if you don't remember, the storage workflow is the one in which we use the iTwin storage to upload our design files and synchronize from there. Now, in order to get access to the iTwin storage, first we need to create an actual iTwin. So we'll start with that step. So I already created a new iModel here in the My iModels page, and it's just called another empty iModel. And as I create the iModel, it also creates the iTwin for the iModel. So we have the ID for the iTwin right here. And also within this iTwin, there is a storage in which I already uploaded our design files. Now, I uploaded these design files using iTwin Storage API, which we'll talk about in a second. But first, let's talk about the overall workflow. So from here, we can actually start synchronizing this data into our iModel. Now, before we can actually start synchronizing, the first step before the synchronization process is to actually get identification for our files, if you remember. So how do we identify these files? How do we point at these files and get their IDs? For that, as we talked about, we can use the storage API. So this is a special API that manages the iTwin storage. You can find it under developer.bentley.com/APIs, and it's under Digital Twin Management, storage. We click on that, and we have our API calls right here. So we have files and folders. The one we want to go with is files in this case, and the command that we'll use is get top level folders and files by project. So we can click try it out to actually run the command, pass in our authorization code, and the only thing we really need here is the project ID, which is our iTwin ID. So we can go back, copy this iTwin ID, paste it in our parameter here, hit execute. And you will see we got our microstation building.dgn, and here's the unique ID for it. And we also have our Revit building and the unique ID for that. So now that we have our file IDs, we can actually use them to go into the synchronization API and synchronize our files. So there are 3 steps involved in the actual synchronization process. They are, first we need to create an actual connection which has our design files and also the iModel and the connectors that we are going to use to synchronize. We need to run the connection to actually run the synchronization job. But this can take time. The synchronization process can take time, as we talked about. So we do need to get the status for our run and see how to find out when it completes. So we'll go through all these 3 steps from the context of the storage API. So we click on storage connections and we can actually create a connection. That's the first step. We click try it out, pass in our authorization code. And then we have these values we need to fill out in our body. So there's a display name for the connection. We'll just call it test connection for now. The iModel ID of the iModel that we're synchronizing into. So we can go to our My iModels page, copy our iModel ID here, paste that in. And then authentication type is going to be user because it's not a service, this is a client workflow that we're using. So we're going to put user as an authentication type, and then the source files. So these include the file IDs of the files we want to synchronize and also the connector type that we want to synchronize with. So file IDs, we can get those from our result in our storage API. For the connector type, we can head on over to the supported formats, and then there is a connector identifier for each connector type. And microstation, for example, is MSTN, and let's look for the identifier for Revit is Revit, and we can fill in these identifiers with the respective files. So I'm going to fill these out, the IDs, and then the connector type. So I copied over my file IDs and the connector identifiers, and now we can go ahead and create this connection. All right, so the connection has been created, and here's a unique ID to identify the connection. So I copy this ID, and from here, I can go ahead and actually run the connection. So the command for that is create storage connection run. Click on that, click try it out, pass in authorization code, and all I need here is the connection ID. Then I can simply hit execute and that'll run our connection. Okay, so you can see that the connection was successfully started, and you can see the ID of the run as well. So I can copy this run ID from here, and I can go into the status. So we can get the status using get storage connection run. Click try it out, pass in authorization code. We can delete these, and we just need the run ID and the connection ID as well. So I saved it here on this sticky note, so let me copy that, paste, and hit execute. And you can see we get our run status. Right now it's still waiting to execute, so it's in a queue, and it will execute shortly. In this way I can keep polling for the status. And you can also see that there's a different status for each individual file. So this is the Revit job, and then this is the MicroStation job. So we'll give this process a couple of minutes to complete. And you can see the synchronization is complete. So that's how storage connection works, all the way from creating a connection to running and getting the status. And now we can integrate this within an application, which we'll see in the next chapter. For now, let's look into the manifest approach as well and see how it's different from the storage approach.